So this session is basically about what we can do in the near term with Wayland in oneiric. Long term, we'll probably be doing something very interesting with it, but for oneiric and until after the next LTS, we're not going to be doing a huge amount with Wayland. For this session, we want to work out what we can usefully do until then. So what incremental steps can we take to get Wayland, to get some testing and interesting things happening with Wayland before we do more radical changes? Reasonable summary?
So for background, for Natty, I packaged up a snapshot of Wayland and got it running under Ubuntu and did a startup script so that you could launch it with wstart. In theory, that would be available right now for everybody to run, but unfortunately, there is a bug with Cairo where NVIDIA users had an increased memory usage on a per application basis, so that was bad.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Wayland had to bite the dust at that point, but it's very close.
That particular problem won't be a problem in, well...
Have you confirmed that?
So there are two ways of working around that problem. One is to have runtime dynamically loaded backends for Cairo, and I believe that was being talked about yesterday, but I couldn't go to that session. I need to follow up. Yeah, the Linaro GLES Cairo work. I believe the end goal is to have runtime loadable backends, which would solve that problem for us. The other.
Now, would that be fed into Ubuntu, or would that be a Linaro specific?
That would be fed into Ubuntu because that would be fed into Cairo upstream and then come into Ubuntu.
Okay.
The other thing that can be done about that is Wayland, now the demo compositor and the demo clients now don't strictly require Cairo GL because the shared memory compositor interface has been implemented on both ends. So we could have, so with a newer snapshot of Wayland, of the Wayland demos, we could have that without re-enabling the GL backend and seeing all of the downsides that entails.
That sounds good. Then we're not dependent on GNOME for do what we need to do.
Yes.
So that seems like maybe that should be the first goal, is to get the package merged with upstream Wayland and new Mesa snapshots and whatever else Wayland requires.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. Let's throw that down.
Because if we can solve the Cairo limitation, then I think we're ready to go.
If you go for the shared memory approach, the only concern is if you want to test the GDK backends or the other toolkit backends, you need to make sure they are using the shared memory stuff, which I'm not sure about.
Okay.
That's a good point, but that's a secondary.
So that is, Jayland, is that a Wayland compositor that uses Xcomposite? Both for e.g. So is that a Wayland
yes.
So that's a Wayland client, that's a Wayland server running as an X client using Xcomposite and then providing
Yeah, it's not actually anything by itself. It's a framework that does all of the initialization and such for you. It just lets you get to writing effects and things.
Okay.
So it'll be a base for implementing a compositor.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. It's not an actual Wayland compositor or anything like that.
Yeah, it's just kind of a framework for having compositors, and it also contains a few examples,
Okay.
like a Qt-based compositor, two Qt-based compositors, QML compositor, and QBGT
So
compositor.
it could be used to build a Wayland compositor, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So then what we were thinking about for the next step beyond this, to take small steps, we were thinking about getting the light DM manager running up on top of Wayland. And ultimately, LDM would need to be a compositor as we understand it, but initially maybe just get it up and running as a simple GUI. Just as a proof of concept. But we're not really sure what the requirements ultimately has for graphics functionality.
So let's ask Robert. So
Depends on your reader, doesn't it?
yeah.
Make it use whatever you want.
So let's pick something really, really, really simple. What would that be?
Cairo.
Black screen.
You could just draw something simple in Cairo.
Yep.
Or you can use the cute stuff.
Or you could use the cute stuff, which might be easier to start off with. So, yes?
Is it possible to start Wayland little
Why don't you guys come on up so that the microphones... Come on.
We don't bite.
You don't.
is it possible to start Wayland in early in the boot process so we can handle other parts of graphics and change?
Right, that would be another interesting thing to do. So that would be essentially replacing Plymouth with Wayland plus some Wayland clients.
If you have enough initialized to do that, then you just start X.
Right, so the thing that Plymouth does that wouldn't work for Wayland is that Plymouth can come up before the DRM device is available. And once the DRM device is available, we're starting X anyway.
Although that depends on what Wayland server you use, right? Isn't there one that works without DRM?
So,
Right now there is, as far as I know.
no. You need...
It's cool, right?
I know there were some patches floating around to make it work with the NVIDIA driver, for example. I don't know. I guess that never got anywhere.
I don't, yeah. Actually, why don't we lay out what we think the pathway from where we are to where we're going, the pathway from where we are to having something useful is. So I think the first thing to do, first thing is to get a proof of concept LightDM running in Wayland. Then step from there to LightDM running in Wayland, capable of properly starting X servers. Stepping to LightDM as a Wayland compositor, then starting X servers as Wayland clients, as a client of the LightDM compositor, and handling user switching through that, and perhaps also things like screensaver password locks and a trusted input path through the LightDM compositor, which can make all of those trusted guarantees that the X server can't. That's the
thought.
Yeah, that's the pathway that we see being reasonable, that we can incrementally walk along to something which is then useful for everyone, or to something that can be used and has advantages over what we have right now. Let's see.
And we don't have a time frame for any of this, because it's lower priority than other things that will take up a lot of time.
Right. Yeah.
So what Robert says on IRC is LightDM would need some work to handle both X servers and Wayland compositors. I think the compositor could be external from LightDM to start with.
I think that's the case. I'm not entirely sure how much overlap there would be between LightDM as a Wayland client and LightDM as a Wayland compositor. And as we've described, the LightDM as a Wayland compositor is the end goal. Not certain. Do the Qt guys have any? I'm not totally familiar with how. Yeah, I'm not aware of how different it would be, client versus compositor, but.
I think that the only problem you would have is that if you want to manipulate, like say LightDM runs on top of a Wayland server, then it spawns the different X servers, say for each user session or the screen lock. You'll need to talk to the server side to do the manipulation between those, like switching from one to each other. But I don't think there's anything.
That's
beyond that point that is too
information, G-Link and SNL on IRC, I think that they would be the best persons to answer that.
There may be some concerns regarding security.
Yeah. So I guess one question. So I guess one question is, is it possible to keep the LightDM client up and have the greeter would be a client, the daemon wouldn't need to be? Right. I think, yeah. would it at the end need to be?
It would need to have, it would want to have its own client for interacting with the user and stuff, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So that bit is probably reusable
Yeah.
at some point or something. But that's Robert's.
Yeah. So as a part of the transition, as part of the transitional time, will Wayland and X be fighting over control of the DRM device? I believe the answer there is yes. That in the transitional area where we're having LightDM and Wayland, if we're having LightDM as a Wayland client spawning X servers, that transitional time has to have the X server as a client of the Wayland compositor, or otherwise they will be fighting over the display device.
You're able to run multiple X servers now and have them both be accelerated. Why? I don't see why that would be any different.
Yeah, I don't think so either. There's been proof of concepts done. I haven't set up one that myself, but other people have. So I don't think that's a huge stumbling block.
So I guess that would just require something needs to drop master on the DRM, I think, and that would be Wayland, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You switch away from the.
You switch
UI
which.
icon.
Yeah, that could. Yeah, so that would work.
I suppose that'd be a Wayland server thing they would have to care about. So.
Yeah.
So in terms of having some sort of moving forward beyond the point where you have X servers, you will want Wayland clients running within those sessions, right? Would you want those clients to run on the actual LightDM compositor?
No.
Or would you actually have to bring up a second compositor and then X on top and have that as a trusted?
So the final, the final architecture that my understanding of what the idea for the final architecture is would be that you'd have a LightDM compositor underneath. On top of that, and that would be the trusted, that's the trusted compositor. On top of that, you'd have each user's Wayland compositor with, and this would be, you'd have like the Unity compositor for their session.
Right.
And then within the Unity compositor for their session, if they start up any X apps, you would spawn a rootless X server, and so those windows would appear to be
seamlessly,
as would appear seamlessly. That might sound like there's a bit of overhead, but it's not. Like Wayland is explicitly architected
exactly.
to make that overhead go away.
Yeah, absolutely.
While still having a trusted compositor underneath, which can be quite small and more easy to audit. And yeah, so that would be the step after having the LightDM compositor start X servers as clients. And I think that can also be done fairly, that would be the next step. So it might, from the notes we have, can we replace Plymouth with Wayland?
You go, yes.
Yeah.
But you need a special compositor for that, and then you'll need to switch. Well, the problem is, if you want it to run before the DRM device is available,
you need a different
compositor, and you need a way to switch from that one to maybe figure a way to switch to DRM during runtime, which I think will be pretty.
Yeah, that basically sounds like we'd be doing a whole lot of work that has already been done by Plymouth for no real benefit.
So I think that the trick will be to try to tweak things to bring the DRM device as soon as possible.
We can already do that at the cost of some boot time. So there's currently many,
Well, you do that at the cost of boot time, but you give the user the perception that things are booting faster. So there's a trade-off there.
That is an interesting trade-off, which we should discuss with some of the Foundations guys. Because you can stick, obviously, the DRM drivers in the RAMFS, which we already do in a number of cases, because if you encrypt your root partition, for example, you need to have a frame buffer up there so you can actually enter stuff. But yeah, that loading the init RAMFS is slow, and so every time you increase its size, it gets worse.
So what will be the reason to replace Plymouth? I'm not familiar with this problem.
I think the thinking behind replacing Plymouth is that Wayland is cool.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, we run into race conditions and stuff where there's contention between different graphics drivers coming and going, and things not letting go of things when other things expect them to, and so we get black screen on boot issues and boots failing to come up and things like that. It's kind of nasty.
But that wouldn't be any better with a custom Wayland compositor trying to hand off to another one.
The proper fix for that would not be drop Plymouth and move to something else.
No.
We probably have the same.
We'd have the same, like that's a set of underlying issues.
Given that you don't need input support or anything like that during the Plymouth stage, I'm leaning towards not actually worrying too much about it.
Yeah, I think that while you could replace it with Wayland, there's no good reason to do it, and it's not going to solve any bugs, and it's not going to make anything easier.
We may find some benefits if we can get some interaction with the users. So we have Wayland. We start getting user, for example, you can log in.
Yeah, so
we have some interaction, and we have at the same time other things can happen.
So that's in fact what Robert has just said on IRC. If we start Wayland early, we could pop up the login screen early and continue to finish booting while users are entering their username and password. If they do that, I guess that's. I'm not sure how many users actually have. So from a expanding to 200 million users point of view, I'm not sure how many of those 200 million users that we want to get are going to have auto login enabled. I suspect a fairly high.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
But that shouldn't affect.
It wouldn't affect it, but it would just make that particular optimization less useful.
Right, well, they'd see a splash screen of some sort.
Yeah.
That's Robert's problem.
Wouldn't the same be true for the splash screen? Can the splash screen get there early too?
We currently have a Plymouth splash screen up there.
So whether it would not make it faster?
It wouldn't make it faster, no. If we can get DRM up earlier, so the only way that things would be substantially better is if we could get DRM up really early, so we didn't need to have anything before DRM came up. And if we can do that,
We don't
then
have proprietary drivers anymore.
And if we can do that and proprietary drivers magically disappear, we can drop Plymouth and have just a single thing, and have just a single display, a single set of display code running everything, which would make things simpler. But as long as it takes a reasonable amount of time to get DRM up, we're going to need a Plymouth before DRM, then deal with the transition, then load X, or Wayland and load X.
Because in terms of interaction with the user, we have two things. The total time that the system loads everything, and the time that the user feels the system.
Yeah.
If we can have, I think the most important is how much time the user can feel the system is loaded.
Yes, yeah, getting a progress bar type thing up early might make it feel like it's booting faster.
Not necessarily.
Or not necessarily? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a Windows guy. I've spent a lot of time with grey bar land.
Yeah. Well, the progress bar is to give the user the feeling that something's going on and things are not stuck.
Right.
But doesn't necessarily give the user the notion that things are going faster.
If you can do something they can respond with, that's
Yeah,
the-
when they
like
can
the
actually
login.
interact. I mean, I think that the closest thing to the goal that you want to have is how fast do I get to my browser? Which is this
Yeah.
Google Chrome
Yeah.
type of thing concept, right?
Yeah.
Straight to browser in 5 seconds. So if you can do that with, obviously the whole system won't boot up that fast, but maybe you can optimize things to make sure the user can log in.
Can log in while other things are happening and get to their browser faster.
You know, it's in that kind of case where it's a specific piece of hardware that we know exactly what driver it's going to run, and we can make the assumption that this is going to be a KMS only system, then maybe we could
We
set
could.
things up differently.
Is there
Yeah.
is there any way you can anticipate that before the process of bringing up the URL starts? I guess that's maybe a okay.
No, but the OEM or during installation time, maybe.
Okay.
Like if we could have the user say, no, I will never have a proprietary driver on this
Right.
piece of hardware, then
Maybe
we
we could-
could maybe plumb things up
It could be
differently.
like a whitelist of drivers plus how.
Well, we can't do any, during boot, we can't do, it's difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean whitelist at the installation time or something like that.
And change. Yeah, that sounds like it would be fairly complex because we then have two different early boot stages.
And I guess and then the whole QA process.
Yeah,
becomes a
gets
nightmare.
more, yeah. And then you need to make sure that users can't install anything which would break that, because then you've broken early boot and people are unhappy.
Sorry.
That's not, so for a certain set of OEM projects, that's probably very interesting. Because
Well, I would have to wonder
they
what
may
users
well.
that would be interested in that as well. I mean, since we're just kicking it,
Yeah, yeah, without any sort
commitment.
of to do. It might be interesting to see how that goes. Yeah.
If Colin's here,
Yeah. Wonder, have we actually benchmarked how much time would be lost if we shoved DRM into the inner manifest? I presume we have.
Yeah, there were some studies.
Yeah.
I think Scott did some tests around that.
And it was,
I don't know what the result was. The stuff Intel did early on with mobile assumed that as KMS would be fast. So I think it much better than we did.
yeah.
That assumption.
Okay, maybe we should maybe we should ask the Qt guys here what they'd like to see. Because I understand that you're very, very interested in Wayland. Anything on an input subsystem for Wayland? No, not really.
I thought it was using libxkb and all that stuff showed next time.
The clients are using libxkb, are they not? And they're reading evdev streams. Which
Looking at multiple processes.
yeah, so
We talked with Chase a little bit about that, and yeah, the current plan is to use just evdev, but for where we want to go with it, that's not going to be sufficient. So
there's apparently some upstream thinks that evdev is like there will need to be a case made for evdev is insufficient for this case, and then someone is going to need to write an input and someone is going to need to write an input subsystem, and if we're very lucky, that can be Chase. But
you don't really need upstream to agree to actually do the protocol extension yourself, because I think that's Christian plans, letting people,
it would be, for something as fundamental as input, it would be nice if that's, like, if there is a limited divergence between different compositors on that.
Well, yeah, I think if you make the case.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
There will be a session this afternoon about possibility of network server.
That might be, yeah.
Because they we have a lot of, for example, if we make a driver for the kernel, go upstream very fast, and because just broadcast of events, but to get these events into the application is
like currently there's no way to get events into the application because the X server doesn't understand.
For example, for the multitouch, there have been a lot of discussion of how to do this, how to
Pulse in.
Yeah.
pulse input.
Network transparent input. Woo! That might be, yeah. I know that one of the reasons why that was not considered sufficient for X is that you need to, in order to send things to the right client, you need all sorts of knowledge of the window hierarchy and where and what clients have selected events and what clients have grabs and where the windows actually are. So if you have a touch here, what window does that event go to?
Well, you have the compositor and the display server together now, so that's
right. That's less of a problem for Wayland. Yes.
Still challenge,
but like many things, Wayland makes that particular bit easier. Yeah, like input is currently an open item on Wayland. Like, there's not really and maybe an input server could work. I would defer to Chase on that because he has much. Chase and Daniel, I believe, will be in that input server session, and they have much better input into, much better insight into what's wrong with X input currently, what would be a really nice system to have if they were implementing it from scratch, or say in Wayland, and why they didn't go with an input server framework for X now.
The problem is in routing events into the applications.
Mhm.
So we can have some functions to modify input to the input, then route it to the application of the widget. But most of times if we need to have protocol and we implement it for each type of the device appearing. For example, for manufacturing, we need a protocol. If you have new sort of devices, for example, Kinect, we need also that would
Right.
be some dynamic way to modify this configuration. And for example, in another context like for HDD devices, we have it's a bit of dynamic spec. The device shows what it can do and can do.
Yeah, I understand that there's a demo of Connect as an X multi-touch device. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
that sounds cool. I'm just not sure how that works. I'm not. Yeah, one of the problems with designing an input protocol is that you need to. Or one of the things that I know that Daniel and Chase are really keen to not do in a new input protocol is try and make it work for everything, including the devices which will come out in 20 years' time that we have no idea about.
Well, I think for our purposes, for just doing the light demo stuff, we don't really care much about it.
The LightDM demo stuff has the very nice property that evdev streams are actually sufficient.
Right. And so maybe next UBS we'll have Chase and others
Yeah.
in the session to work out in more detail how that should work.
Yeah.
So in terms of like some tasks, when do you think you'll be able to do a Mesa update?
Probably, yeah, so
Later this month or next week?
later, let's see.
You guys have figured on the middle of June with Mesa Branch, right?
That was, yeah, when Mesa Branch was the plan for Mesa. If we want to push that up, we could take an earlier snapshot if we wanted. I'm not desperately opposed to an earlier snapshot.
Well, how about a PPA? How about like a
A
state?
PPA would work fine, and I could do that in maybe not next week, but the week after that.
So then once that's in place, then I can update the Wayland snapshot, start kicking that around.
Yep.
Then when the next snapshot does go in, then I can hopefully put Wayland in.
Yeah. So that would be. Let's stick that timeline into that page.
So Robert, I'll also try to get, I'll experiment with LDM a little bit running under Wayland, but I don't know how much time I'll have to actually do LDM hacking to make it work, but I don't know, maybe we can cross that bridge when we get to it.
That's a...
Running on Mac OS.
Yeah, that's... I guess that's entirely possible. How would... But... So if you're running, if you want to get Wayland running on Mac OS and Windows, you'd probably need a different buffer sharing mechanism between those, but you could conceivably have a common input protocol. I guess the way to make that happen would be to talk to whoever ends up doing the Wayland input protocol.
The Kronos group will start working on an input standard. So I don't know if Ubuntu developers will work with them.
Say that again.
The Kronos group is starting to work on an input standard like Ubuntu.
Oh, really?
I don't know if we can get it.
That would be interesting. I'm not, like, we don't have any, I don't think any of our input guys have any ties with Kronos, or I don't think any of our input guys are at all aware of that, but that sounds quite interesting if there is going to be a standard input, Kronos standard input API. That would be that would be quite interesting.
Did you mean OpenWF? It's already a standard.
That's more compositing, right? That's not input though.
That's what was the next step.
Yeah, OpenWF is a standard and might be interesting, particularly because so OpenWF would be interesting because that is the thing most likely that proprietary drivers. That's likely to be the thing that's the thing which the proprietary drivers are most likely to support that could be useful for Wayland. But I'm not really sure about A, whether they do support it, B, whether they plan to support it, and C, how difficult it would be to have an... I know there are patches, I know there are patches on the Wayland, either in Git or on the mailing list for an OpenWF-based compositor. I'm just not sure how that would integrate.
Of course, I hesitate to. If we talk about anything more, we'll have more
I'll just want for the Wayland snapshot, what I'm thinking about doing is update it to as new as possible without requiring us to go beyond where we want to go with
Mesa.
So, you know, I'll probably have to stop updating once we get to once it needs something new written 7.11. And hopefully that should be pretty likely in a second.
Yeah, I think
Or if it needs any dependencies that we're not.
Yeah. Yep. I think the Mesa changes required by Wayland are dying down, so it's possible that things would be good. But who knows? That's the joy of owning all of the stack. So, right. So just.
If anybody else in here is interested in hacking on Wayland packaging or anything, just let us know.
If I have any time, yeah.
Yep, that's the predicate for all of us.
Yeah.
Well, more specifically, what aspect are you kind of interested in?
At least getting it far enough to have the late daemon start up a Wayland compositor and having the reader run as a client, and then see where things go.
So was that hacking / packaging or hacking
Well,
all
both,
packaging?
really.
Okay. So in Colton, we're looking into ways to get familiar with the project. So we might look into it. I cannot promise.
Yep.
Because consultancy business
Yeah.
resources come and go. But the light DM stuff is something we might actually try and at least try. What I'm saying is that we cannot commit to actually finish it.
Right.
Right.
But I can promise we'll look into it and see how far can we get.
Okay. Yeah, and let's, just to avoid duplicating effort, let's keep in touch
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
if we do anything, to make sure that we all leverage whatever we do accomplish.
Right. So what will be the right forum for me to?
The Ubuntu X mailing list is probably where these decisions should go.
Okay.
The decisions, discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ubuntu X IRC channel too.
That's another one. Yeah.
Right.
That's where we'll be hanging out.
I'll hang on.
What's the cost of adding features to Wayland? Does it have a plugin system?
You can extend the protocol,
Yeah.
but it's not that straightforward.
And so I think possibly the premise of your question is incorrect as well, because Wayland is not so much a server as a library for building
Framework,
servers in your compositor.
Like
So-
Wayland itself, when you build it, the only dependency is FFI. It's then bringing up the compositor and the client backend, where all the meat is. So you can bring new extensions to the protocol and create libraries that pair together with the Wayland client and the Wayland server library, and then use those to bring up your compositor on your client side.
So the answer is your compositor can do whatever the hell it wants. If you're
And the clients do.
and the clients
As
as
long
well.
as the
As long as they agree
Yeah,
on,
exactly.
as long as they agree on the actual protocol, you can do whatever. Your compositor doesn't even need to, your compositor can also do things like export a dbus API to modify other things, or you can hand sockets off to your clients and write and speak your own custom binary protocol over there. All of these things will make,
Thanks, Robert.
thank you, Robert, yeah. All of these things will tie your compositor and your clients together, because you obviously won't be able to. That's one of my concerns with Wayland is that it's
Yeah.
going to be easy to make things which
Yeah.
don't interoperate.
I think that in the short midterm there will be an ecosystem of compositors and clients.
With things which are,
Yeah.
we'll probably expand out into having a couple of not quite compatible compositors, and then hopefully there will be some consolidation. I don't think a little bit of diversification is a bad idea at the start to just
Well,
have some
I
experiments.
think-
As long as they die off.
As long as they die off.
I think that the premise from Christian is that he wants to allow people to try things before things settle, because otherwise he's going to have to try to
He's going to have to
cover
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, you don't actually want to design the entire API without anyone having tried it, and yeah.
And it may not be, the display manager may not be the right level for forcing clients
Yeah.
stuff in the way. I mean, we may want to see it like a toolkit.
Yeah. And toolkit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're out of time, so.